Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. So this will be the Q&A session for your review series, part number 1. And I do have some agenda here, so I'll just briefly mention that. I will start with some quick announcement just to remind you about what work items you really watch out for. And also for the Google Doc, I solved all the questions already for earlier yesterday in section B. So I already got a recording. I got timestamps over there. I'll show it to you, so I don't need to repeat. I will just show to you where you can find them. So it's very convenient for you to look for your answer. But for today, I think mainly I can take any of your questions live. So just talk about, just express your questions, and I'll answer right away. So that's the way to go. But of course, for week number 1, I may not expect so many struggle on the basic stuff. But next week, when you study part 2 of your tutorial for review, I might expect a little bit more questions, but we'll see that for next week. Okay. Let me start with a question that John asked before I started the recording. Let me repeat the question again. When we install Eclipse, which JRE version should we install? The short answer is any version above 1.8 will be okay. So your safest bet will be just to install the latest version, which I believe is 1.16. Okay. And also, do I simply install the Eclipse IDE for Java developer option? I think that option is definitely okay. I saw one of some of your fellow students coming to my office hour. That's the version they install. That will be okay. However, this is what I would recommend. So if you simply go to Google and Google for Eclipse download, the first hit, okay, you can just go to the Eclipse download page. And in your, they will actually recommend the Eclipse installer 2021-09 now includes a JRE for Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. I think this might be the version you want to download. So once you download it, you will actually set up the JRE for you, according to Eclipse. I think that might be the best. On the other hand, if you already got some JRE installed on your machine, you can definitely install the Eclipse IDE for Java developers. Just for your information, between different versions, the Eclipse interface might look slightly differently. But I can tell you that the version I used for my tutorial is actually this particular standalone version. But it shouldn't make a difference. So either way, okay, doesn't matter. Either way is acceptable. So John, does that answer your question? I hope. All right. Let's now go on. Very good. Okay, let's now go on to some quick announcement, right? Which I made also to your fellow student in section B. Let me just mention that quickly. I want to mention for your lab 0 part 1, it will be due tomorrow, September 17th. And please check the precise time on your lab manual, okay? And then for your lab 0 part 2, it was released yesterday. So I think if you haven't really finished your lab 0 part 1, I will recommend that you finish that as soon as possible so you can also get started for part 2. And then it will be due next Friday, not tomorrow, but next Friday, September 24th. But I will recommend, since I'm also going to, according to the schedule, your semester calendar, I'm going to release your lecture week number 3 on Monday, and also your lab number 1 on Wednesday. So that's kind of on the calendar. I'll show it to you in just a moment. So it will be maybe your best interest to really finish the lab 0 part 2 to maybe watch between 30 to 50 minutes per day, if possible, and then have some reflection and to formulate your questions on the Google Doc if necessary. So that'll be my recommendation, rather than trying to only watch hours of videos maybe before the deadline. That may not be the way to go, okay? And then your written test is not coming so soon, but it's in about 2 weeks, just to remind you. And your written test number 1 will be based on partially the review tutorial series part 1 and part 2. But I will give you next week, I'll give you the practice questions and also preparation guide. So that's something you will also get enough time, and also enough instruction to get prepared. Okay. I want to show to you very quickly about the semester calendar. I think it's always a good idea to know where you are, where you have been, and where you will be, right? Always good to know. So if you go to the 2030 lecture site, and then you will see there's a semester calendar link over here, which I went over already on the syllabus section, but I just want to remind you whenever I can. Okay, so now we are September 16th. We are here. Okay, so hopefully you already try to get started with Lab 0 Part 2. If you haven't, I encourage you to really try to get started with Lab 0 Part 2 as soon as possible. Okay, so we are here, and then tomorrow, Lab 0 Part 1 will be due at a certain time. Please, again, check your lab manual time. The submission will be closed promptly. Okay, and then starting from week number 3, we will actually pre-record all the lectures for you to study. So what's really the difference between lectures and tutorials? Lectures are primarily based on slides and maybe some visual illustration on my iPad, whereas for your tutorials on week 1 and week 2, they are more like give you some hands-on experience with the Eclipse. So they're a little bit different. But starting from week number 3, we'll focus more on the slides and also concept. And then, of course, sometimes I might give you some Eclipse demo as well, but it will not be the focus. Okay, and then for your lab number 1, which will definitely use the foundation that I review in part 1 and part 2 for the first 2 weeks, lab 1 will be due next Wednesday. And after it is released, you got about 10 days before it is due. So I would say to really take a full advantage of the days you're given to do lab 1, you may want to try to finish your lab 0 part 2 by going over maybe between 30 to 50 minutes a day for the video and reflection, formulation of questions, and etc. And try to finish that very soon before that or after that. Okay, so you can take the 10 days to work on your lab 1. All right, and then your lab 0 part 2 will be due next week, next Friday, as I said. And then still coming in about 2 weeks, we got your written test number 1. As I said, I'll give you practice questions. I'll also give you guidance next week. So you got at least 1 week to get properly prepared. All right, so that's about a look ahead for what's going to happen for this course. We are moving, and I will go as faithfully as possible with the calendar. If there's any exception I have to make, I'll definitely let you know, but I'll try for my part. Okay, so that's about the announcement. Okay, so guys, before I go on to some more technical contents, is there any question you have related to how the course policy or anything about the course? Anything that's not technical? Anything? Feel free to speak up if you want to.
Professor, is it possible for the labs to be due later in the day than 2 o'clock?
You mean for the deadline for the lab?
Yes.
I think the reason that I chose that time was because if there's any technical issue that we might write into, that I will still have the still within my work hours. So that's why I chose 2 p.m. And usually when we release the lab, I give you actually more than a week to do so. So that's why you should really think about maybe it is the case for lab number 1, but I would say for later labs, you don't really want to spend too many hours on the actual submission day. The actual submission day is really for you just to make a submission. So I think for the 2 p.m., I would like to stick to it for now. But if you got any difficulty of submitting, you can maybe send me a private message. I will see if I can accommodate. But I think for the 2 p.m. deadline, I'll stick to it for now. Hopefully that's understandable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, guys, any more questions regarding the course policy, please? Yeah, if still a worry about what's going to be the format for your written test, don't worry, it's coming. Okay, as a promise, I'll give you some practice questions to get you prepared. Okay. All right, seeing none. Okay, let me now mention some stuff that you can refer to for the Q&A that your fellow student actually got yesterday. Let me just mention that quickly. Okay. So if you go to the 2030 lecture site, you will see under the questions section, we got part 1 and part 2. So part 1 is actually for questions related to tutorial, for the lab 0 part 1. And for part 2 that you're about to start very soon, that will be to be posted on this Google document, right? I'm going to go over this next week. Okay, for this week, let's look at that. So here, I already answered all the questions yesterday in yesterday's Q&A section, right? Of course, you're not required to attend yesterday's section. I'm just saying that that's what I did yesterday. And before I refer to you the video quickly, and I want to draw your attention to here. So if you look at the documents, so there are about 3 excellent questions related to the course that I also gave my response to in the Google Doc. So you can read my written response. But one of them is about why we are using Eclipse for this course. Another one is about, I know it's very relevant to you guys. So for those of you who actually took EECS 1021, or even more general, for any one of you who did not take the first year course with me, are you going to get any unfair disadvantage? I really try my best to really eliminate it. So that's why for the first 2 weeks, I really try to create some tutorial for review for you to go over, so that after the first 2 weeks, once you finish the 2 parts, and also clarify all your questions, I'm hoping that at least you'll be in this the equal starting ground as everybody else. That's really my hope. Okay, so, and then I will also give you some practice questions, not just for written tests, but also for your programming tests as well. So you will definitely get enough material to get prepared. Okay. And then we didn't have that many questions for the part 1 of the tutorial video. That's kind of expected. So what I want to do is I want to refer you to it. If you go back to the page site over here, if you simply go under the Q&A session, so September 15 was yesterday. If you click on the YouTube video over here, okay, you will see that under the video description over here, I put the timestamps about all the topics I discussed yesterday. So I would say, to save your time, just go over the list of topics. Any ones that might interest you, you can look into them directly. So I don't need to repeat. Okay. So now what I will do is, I didn't see any new questions added to the Google Doc, so there's nothing for me to go over. So what I would like to do now is open the floor to all of you, so you can ask me any questions you might have related to the OOP, or related to the slides, to the tutorial videos, or written notes, anything. I will answer right away. So I will give you time to, I'll pause a little bit for you to think about any questions.
Yeah, I just had one question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so for the tutorial videos, the part of the code where it prompts the user to enter the original price and the model name.
Yep.
In the tutorial videos, you commented that, and you were saying that you were just going to comment it just for now and just for demonstration purposes. So I was just wondering, because like I already handed it in and I uncommented that part.
You don't need to.
That make...
You don't need to. It wouldn't make a difference. So the question was, actually, that's I don't quite remember I did that. Maybe you're right. Okay, so the question was, in the console application class, the only one we created was a product app class. And somehow I commented out certain lines, which maybe I said in the video, I will comment them back. I would say in this case, either put them back or put them in. It's okay. So it's not going to affect your mark. So when we actually look at your actual submission for your Lab 0 Part 1 and Part 2, we are more focusing on other classes and test cases, right? So you don't need to worry.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so sorry, just to confirm, I did in fact keep it commented out. So should I be concerned about that?
No, you should not be concerned about.
Okay.
It's talking about yeah, you're talking about the product app class, right? The console application class.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, then yeah, you don't need to concern as long as you. Okay, guys, one thing I may want to mention. So this will apply to all the labs for later. So every time, I would say this is more like a practice I would encourage you to adopt, maybe from now on, if that wasn't your habits, from the first year. Okay, I will highly encourage you to do so. So for example, let's say you have your package over here, and then you got certain classes. I'm just using a different package to give you the example. Let's say I'm developing this particular person class, right? I would say one thing I observed from my students from the first year are very common. Actually, I tell you what, even for third year students, I also saw this a lot. So I shouldn't really say it's only first year students. Okay, so let me say this. Maybe you have a very long class and you're trying to develop lots of code in a single class. Maybe you develop maybe about 50 lines of code, and then you never, whenever you make any changes, you will see there is a star sign over here on the tab, right? Eclipse will only compile or recompile your code after you have resaved your file. Okay, they will only do that. So that means if you have developed 50 lines of code without ever saving, so that means you never know if the lines you have developed since the last compilation will actually cause any new errors. You will never know until you hit the save button. So this is my tip to you. Number one, you want to make sure for almost every line of code you're developing in Eclipse, you want to keep pressing save, Control S to save it. And once you save it, if you see, for example, let's say if somehow I make a mistake over here, right? And of course, currently I wouldn't know. right? Of course, if you look at it, there's a red cross, you would know, but you wouldn't see anything on the tab over here. As soon as I say I Control S to save the line, I will see the red cross on the tab over here. I will also see the red cross on the class name over here. Whenever you submit your programming test or maybe lab or anything for grading, you definitely should make sure there is no red cross. And also there's no error under the problems panel. That's something I want to recommend. So what's the best practice? You want to save your file for almost every line of code you're writing. Okay, let me write it down just for everybody's benefits, and let me make it precise. Okay, so this will be the practice I would recommend, not just for this course, but for any programming project you might develop later. Okay, so recommended practice. For coding. Okay, so what we know is Eclipse only recompile your code when changes are saved. Okay, so tip number one, you want to save your development changes almost on a line basis, which means for every line you create, you should really save. Okay, so tip number two, you got to keep saving. And the number two, as soon as you notice a compilation error, and usually you will see that as a like a red cross on the File tab. You should fix it right away. And one thing that's really important is number two is really trying to make your development tasks more efficient in a long term, because whenever you see any compilation error, given that you're trying to save your code for almost every line, right? So that means most likely this might be most likely resulted from the last line of change. Rather than saying you only save your code after developing 100 lines of code, in that case, it will be too difficult for you to figure out exactly how to fix them. Okay, so these are the two suggestions I have for you, right? So every time before you submit your code, make sure there's no compilation error. And the best way to really go forward for that is for every line of code you develop, save it first. Okay. All right, that's a very quick suggestion over here. All right. All right, any other questions? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, question here, please.
Okay. When I try to step into one of my JUnit tests, you remember in your tutorial when you click step into, it just jump into a string. Then you click step return and click the step into again to get to the product class, right?
Right.
But I just can't get into the product class.
You just cannot get to the product class. Okay, it's more about the debugger. Okay, let me see this. You know what? I think because this might be, it's likely that this might be specific to your Eclipse installation. So I would say this might be better answer if you can. Do you think you might be able to drop by my office hour today at 3 p.m.? So in that case, I can let you share your screen and then I can look into the error with you. Okay, sounds good. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I got one private question over here. is it okay to ask question about lab 0 part 2? Absolutely, that's okay. So if I can answer right now, yeah. So if you got question about lab 0 part 2, go ahead, please. Either part 1 or part 2, either one is okay. You can either type on the chat, or you can simply just ask me right now. Oh, it's on the Q&A forum. You mean on the course forum? In that case, maybe I'll check it later after the Q&A session. I'll respond to you on the forum. Okay, so one question from Michael. Oh, sorry, not Michael, Michelle. Okay, do we have to worry about the code that was commented out in the other classes? No, I would say in general, if I got any, let me just show to you. Okay, let me switch the workspace just for now. I think that the reason that I put so many comments in the tutorial is because I want to have some written documentation for the explanation. That's my main intention, right? So for example, you can see, let me just go to another class. Let's say, let me go to maybe the product class, let's say. For comments like this, right? As I said in the video, they are not part of the execution, right? So as far as the grading is concerned, you won't be affected if you somehow got either more comments, or maybe you got some revised wordings of the comment. That's okay, okay? So for the comments, you don't really have to be exactly the same as mine, but I would suggest, if in case you want to just save your typing by ignoring all my comments, you wouldn't be penalized for the grading. That's okay. However, you want to make sure whatever you skip about commenting is really something that you understood completely, right? That would be my suggestion. Okay. Yeah, so that's exactly what I meant. So for example, you can see in the toString method that you mentioned. So since I commented out these two versions over here, so if you chose not to include them in your submitted code, that's okay. As long as you got one working version, that'll be fine. Does that answer your question? All right, very good. Yeah. Yeah, but I would say starting from your lab number 1, whenever you're developing your own code, even though we wouldn't check it, right? So I would say it might be a good practice to always try to document the critical steps of your code. So later on, maybe after a few months, if you want to revisit the code you developed for this course, you will be able to understand the rationale of the design decisions. So that's a recommended practice as well. Okay, any more questions?
Oh, hi.
Hi, please.
I have a question about the zip file submission.
Sure.
For part 1. So in the zip folder, should there be another folder called Apple Shop, or should it just be like the bin and source?
It would be okay. It would be something like this. Okay, so I'm right here. Okay, for part 1, right?
Yeah.
Let's say this is how you export the projects. You will say right click and say export archive, and then let's say Apple Shop. Let me save it on my desktop, let's say. Okay, so on my desktop, you can see now I got Apple Shop over here. If I try to unzip it, so I should get Apple Shop. I should get this directory folder directly. Under Apple Shop, I will get a bin, I will get a source, and etc.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think let me just make a quick reference to what you should also check on your own. For example, if you go to lab 0 part 1 instruction there, I will for almost every lab, I will always give you some screenshots over here to show you when you unzip the project archive file you submitted, you should really make sure that, for example, top level should be Apple Shop, under which we got bin and also source. Under source for part 1, you got console apps, JUnit tests, model, and these 3 classes. That's something you want to verify. Okay. All right. All right. Any more questions? Yeah, so guys, I would say if so far you have been feeling quite comfortable with what I went over or what I review for part 1, I think it's a very good sign. That's not that's good. But I would say for part 2, you may want to pay a little bit more attention because I'll speak about reference type attributes, which will definitely take a little bit more thinking, where you, especially when you trace the code. Yeah. Okay, one question, private question. Let's see. Okay, let me see. Okay, so the question was here. How do we, let me read the question out and then I'll give you some discussion. How do we decide the classes we created based on the problem and the JUnit test cases we are given? Maybe if we can discuss how we decided the classes and methods for the Apple shop. Yes, okay. It's a very good question here. So there are actually two parts for this question I want to clarify over here. Okay. We talk about OOP, like object-oriented program developments. There are at least two possible ways to do it, okay? Approach number one, given informal problem description. I'll talk about what I meant by informal. The informal here is really the key. Given informal problem descriptions, come up with, you know what? Let me just be a little bit more detailed here. Identify the relevance nouns and verbs. I'll give you an example in just a moment. Nouns and verbs. And then convert them into classes and methods. And of course, we know very well how many we got different kinds of methods, either constructor for creating objects or accessors for inquiring about the object states, or maybe mutators for modifying the object value, right? The attribute value for the objects, right? And let me, I'll give you several examples over here. Number one, let me make a cross-reference to your slides for review. And then you will see two examples over there. If I go to the classes and objects review slides, if I go there, okay, and then let me just point to you. Maybe that's something you have done, you have read already. I just want to point out to you. So you will see the first example I gave about OO thinking is about the two-dimensional points over here. So this is some informal problem description. Apparently, this paragraph over here is written by some natural language. And natural language is very open, right? It could be English. It can be any of your mother tongues, any language that's actually used for communication. The problem description is written in some natural language. And then what you got to do is to identify the relevant nouns and verbs. And nouns are usually converted into attributes or classes. For example, I will identify point over here. That will be identified as a relevant noun, and that should be used for class in this case. And then we say that on a two-dimensional plane, identified by their signed distance from the x and y axis. Okay, so x and y axis over here. So these are the nouns which I can identify as attributes. And then also, given 2 points, we are often interested in knowing the distance between them. So to calculate the distance between 2 points, that's also some verb, some action we would like to convert into maybe some accessor, right? So that's kind of the we call formulation process. So this is more like a formulation process. Formulation process from natural language requirements to programming implementation. Okay, for this course, you don't need to do this. Okay, let me just make it clear. Number one is very advanced. Not required for this course. for EECS 2030. Instead, most likely you will get this kind of practice in the software design course in the 3rd year. Will be covered in EECS 3311. So where in the software design course, you might be given some, maybe like several pages of informal description. You have to work out exactly how many classes, how many packages, and how many methods you want to arrange the your solution. So that would be what you have to do in the 3rd year, but it will be a little bit too advanced for the 2nd year. For the 2nd year, we're still learning about the different features for the OOP language. So you're not ready yet. For number 1, you can think about that's more like my job. So for my job as the instructor, when I design your laboratory exercises, I will need to work out exactly what classes and methods I want you to implement. So number 1 is something I do for you for EECS 2030, but you will be able to do it for 3311. And when you graduate, if you go into industry for work, you definitely have to know how to do 1. Okay, that's for number 1. And number 2 is what you will be required to do for this course, number 2. Okay, so for number 2, given formal documentation, infer the API. API simply means the programming interface, right? Infer the API and implementation of classes and methods. Okay, and there are different forms of the formal documentation. The ones we consider in this course will be JUnit test cases. JUnit test cases. Okay, let me give you one example over here. And of course, that's one of the documents I assign you to read. And that will be actually used for your lab number 1 and for most of the labs and also for your programming tests. Let me show to you. So approach number 2 is basically about over here. If you click on the inferring classes and methods from JUnit tests, if you click on that, okay, you will see that this is the documents about the strategy you should really adopt to actually infer the classes and methods from JUnit test cases. Okay, I'll give you one example here. At the end, you will see there is the example over here, right? Let me click on that, right? We got a starter and also we got a solution. You can think about your lab and your programming test. It's more like you'll be given a starter code like this, and you have to develop something like the solution. Okay, that's something you can also look at. Let me do that together with you. If I click on that, let me just say OK. And then I will go to desktop over here. And then let me just now go to Eclipse again. And what I will do is let me just import the what you are usually given in the test in the lab will be some archive file that I exported from somewhere. Okay. So I would say file, import, and then existing projects, select archive file, and browse. And all these steps will be documented in your lab manual and programming test instructions, so you don't need to memorize. Okay, so the one I just downloaded was this one here. Okay, so that's some starter code. And say open, and I'll say finish. So what we're given is a project that does not compile. That's kind of expected. And if I click on source and then JUnit tests, I got model, right? Usually you will only be given these 2 packages. Sometimes I might give you some skeleton code for the console application, but in this case, only model and JUnit test cases. And the model package is empty, meaning that it will be your entire responsibility to put stuff inside the model. You may need to create several new classes, and in each new class, you have to put in some new methods. That will be your job. If you click on the test cases over here, so the test, you can see we got test number 1. Oh, just one, just for example, right? Of course, in the lab or programming test, you will be given more test cases. So now in this particular test, you can see that we have compilation error, especially if you move your mouse over here counter. And by the way, you can see here we got a counter over here. The counter does not seem to be able to be resolved to be a type. That means the counter does not exist, right? So how do we fix it? We need to create a counter class in the model package and make sure we also import the model package in this test, in this JUnit test class. And number two, the counter is actually the counter class is expecting two kinds of a constructor. One will be the default constructor. The other one will be the constructor with an integer arguments. So that's how I make the inference, right? So that's what I meant by approach number two. When you are given some formal documentation like a JUnit test cases, which does not compile to begin with, it will be your job to infer about what classes and also what methods I should really implement in the model package so that everything will compile. And then when I hit on the JUnit test class, I can get a green bar. Okay, so that will be your job. Okay, let me just put it here. Implementation of classes and method so that number one, everything compiles. Number two, you get a green bar. Green bar from the JUnit test, from the running the JUnit test cases. Okay, so that's about these two approaches. But for number two, you will definitely get chances to practice before your programming test. You will get a chance to practice in your lab number one. You will get a chance to practice in the practice question for programming test number one before the actual test. Okay, but it's so important for you to go over the document yourself here. And then let me know if you got any questions. You can ask me in the later Q&A. That's also fine, right? But it's important for you to go over that first. Now, I want to go back to the original question there. I think you might be interested in maybe this particular part, even though it's a little bit too advanced at this level. But I'll just give you some idea. So the way I did it was I just go to the refurbished shop, for example, Apple over here. So that's the Apple website. And then the one I want to go to is the refurbished store, for example. That's a store website I showed you in the tutorial video. So for example, when I look at this website here, there's so many nouns over here. That doesn't really mean I'm going to create a single Java class for every noun. I don't necessarily have to create one class called offer. I don't have to. Also, I don't really need to create maybe one class, maybe called a shop is not a good example. I don't need to create one class called quality, right? So you got to make a decision about which one you want to turn into classes. So the decision I would make if I want to create an extended project, I might make one class for Mac, one class for iPad, one class for iPod, and etc. And if I click into Mac, for example, I will see there are so many criteria for me to actually select the Mac I want to buy. In that case, what I can, oh, is my voice lagging a bit? Is it? Guys, can you hear me correctly?
Yeah, now it's okay, sir.
Okay, sure, no problem. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. Okay, let me just repeat the last part. Okay, so you can see there's so many search criteria for the Mac. For example, in that case, I need to make a decision. Should the size be an attribute or should size be a class? That's some decision I have to make. But in my case, I said that maybe for the Mac, I should really have size, release year, finish, memory, capacity, all of them as attributes for the Mac class, right? So that will be the kind of process I need to go through in order to figure out all the classes and methods I want you guys to do in the tutorial. So that's my job. It's more like a part one over here. But for part one, you don't need to worry for this course. All right. All right, so hopefully that answered the original question. I think the main thing for you to worry about for this course would be number two. Okay. All right, guys, any more questions? Okay. I have some private question over here. Let me see. Okay, what is the duration of time I need to go through the tutorial videos because the deadline tomorrow for lab? Okay, so your lab 0 part 1, I believe that one contains about 4 hours of the video, I believe. But remember, lab 0 part 1 was released last Wednesday, about more than a week ago. So that's why I gave you more than a week to do so. So if you only started right now for your Lab 0 Part 1, then I know that it's, well, if you have to make the submission deadline tomorrow, then you got to start watching. But it's not really recommended for you to watch so many hours before the submission deadline. So my recommendation would be, as soon as you finish Lab 0 Part 1, you want to start your Part 2 as soon as possible. You don't want to delay that because it's not recommended to watch so many hours before the deadline. That wouldn't retain in your memory for good. All right, any more questions? All right, let me pause maybe a few more moments, okay? Okay, about the GitHub terminal commands, since the password doesn't work, is there any other way to clone? Yeah. And because okay, you do know about the personal access token are a bit hard to use. Okay, so it's kind of beyond my control for your GitHub clone process from the terminal. GitHub changed their policy since the past August, only about a month ago, right? So right now, if you try to clone your repository from the terminal, like what I showed to you on the tutorial, you must use something called personal access token, right? Let me just mention that quickly for those of you who didn't know, right? So it'll be called GitHub and personal access token, right? If you simply Google for that, you will find details about how you can find out the personal access token for your GitHub. So once you get a token, it's more like an automatically generated password. They will only generate for you once, and then you have to save it somewhere safe. Maybe write down on a piece of paper, will save that somewhere on your computer. And then every time you want to use the terminal to clone your GitHub repository, you have to copy and paste or type in that particular token. So that's the requirements. Yeah, I'm afraid that's the way it is for GitHub right now. But if you use the GitHub desktop, I believe you can still use your password for the GitHub. So maybe you can want to use your GitHub desktop on your machine. But if you want to do it from the remote lab, in that case, terminal is the only way that would be possible. Okay, since we don't have GitHub desktop on the Linux machine in the lab. Okay, very good. Guys, any more questions? Let me just switch back over here. Any more? Yeah, don't feel bad if you don't have a question for this week, because I don't think this week is very challenging, but please take my advice. Tutorial series part 2 covers the topics that are more challenging about reference type attributes. So you really want to pay more attention to part 2. So maybe I can expect more questions from you next week. Okay. Okay, I think I'll pause for another minute, okay, just in case you're still thinking about your questions, right? Yeah, we definitely don't have to run the entire 90 minutes. We can always save some time so you can do some other work, right? Or take some rest if you feel tired, either way. Okay, so just keep yourself reminded that we always got some items coming up. So always look at the semester calendar so you would know what you can expect coming. Where's the semester calendar? I think it is. Let me click on that again over here. Okay, semester calendar. All right. All right, so guys, I think it seems to me you're fine for now. I still have my office hour at 3 p.m. Feel free to drop by if you want to speak to me privately. If you got any other questions, you can make use of other resources, Course Forum, my email, or we got the schedule optional TA session. I think we got one today and also tomorrow. And or email. Email might be the quickest way to get my attention sometimes. All right. All right, so if no more questions, shall we call it a day?
Hi, sir.
Oh, you got questions?
I just asked one question and you told me to go to office hour.
Oh,
So I
yes,
just
yeah,
want-
about your debugger. Yes, please. Can you just drop by my office hour so we can look at that on your machine, my sharing screen? Yes.
Oh, is it okay? I can share it now or not?
How about this? Let's say once I finish the Q&A over here, can you just join my office URL, the Zoom, and then I can talk to you right away after this session. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, just maybe not this Zoom link. Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk to you right after this. Another question here from Marcus: is that lab at 5:30 tonight and optional? It's optional. Yes, correct. But guys, I tell you what, it's a little bit. When I say something's optional, I really hope that you wouldn't take it the wrong way. When I say something's optional, you would simply think, oh, because that's optional, I wouldn't do it, right? So I want to emphasize that it's really scheduled for your benefits. Unless you feel absolutely confident about the course materials, you shouldn't really skip all the scheduled lab sessions and also the Q&As. That's my advice. But if you really feel confident, by all means, you can skip them. Okay. Thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward to more questions from you maybe next week about the part 2. All right, guys, take care. And then I will see you very soon. Bye-bye.